Audio test. Hello. Let me fix this up a bit. This thing's all jacked up. If you're new here, I'm one of the founders of King Panda Studio. I primarily design the games, the video games, as well as the card games, and kind of just handle the administration portions of the studio in general. Oh, I'm gonna take that off. So tonight I want to think through and talk about why we kind of decided to take a little break from our game Aetherforge. If you had followed any of that or heard about any of it. Sorry about that. Um, so one of the big reasons that we decided to kind of take a step back from Aetherforge development was primarily the architectural design. At some point, I had hit a roadblock with what it was we were trying to build. So, like, why wasn't Aetherforge really working for us? As we were progressing through the project, I started to notice that there were some issues with just general, like, architectural design. So, what is it that I'm talking about? Typically, at least for me, I don't know about other people, but most tutorials and stuff, I feel like, really try to get you to start designing a video game and like the mechanics of the actual game itself. And they don't really focus too much on like the overhaul core like architectural design of the game. So that's kind of where I started to see these flaws come into place. So for instance, as we were developing it, I had issues with scene transitions. While I could hard code scene transitions in, these scene transitions were not scalable, essentially. If I changed something or wanted to rename it, I would have to go back and re-alter the entire uh, scene transition, um, the reference to where I was actually calling it. There was also issues with audio files, so as we added in sound effects for shooting or background music or whatever it was, honestly, um, well, there wasn't really a great way to do it. Yes, I could have like set it up in a very specific like embedded way, um, but it just wasn't scalable. And one of the things that always bothers me uh, when doing projects is scalability. I like the ability to go back and alter these things, um, and fix them up. So it's kind of where we went from there. Um, one second here. So yeah, we broke away from Aetherforge primarily for these reasons. Um, Adding levels in wasn't working. One of the big ones was enemies. Um, I struggled primarily with and other game engines. Um, it's I can't remember what Unreal Engine calls it specifically. Um, there are it's like a duplication of a object, instantiated versions of it, duplication. It's a child. You create a child of a parent. So basically, you create something as a base, and then you almost basically duplicate it. So it inherits the original code, um, and you can then add on to it and add specific things. So in the new game engine that we're using, Godot, I did not know how to do that. We had enemies that really had a base enemy structure, and there was no point in creating new enemies for every single thing, like new script, new scene. Like it just didn't make sense. The base for all of these guys already existed, and they just really needed some extended scripts to adjust, like what type of enemy they were. Were they a sniper class? Were they assault class? Like what were their, stats? And those were some of the things that we struggle with. I could have created those individually, but it just becomes one of the things where it's overworking these things and very micromanagey, and like you have to go and make sure this specific enemy has like all the details that you need. So it didn't it didn't really make sense. Um, so where were we at? Why did we decide to pause? The breaking point, essentially. I got to this point. I'm hitting this wall. I'm now at this crossroads where it's, do I create a brand new project and start this from scratch with all the progress that we already have, or do I continue this path and just keep making this mess and keep recoding everything? And I really wasn't sure, but I knew in my head that there was an architectural design issue, and I had an idea of how I wanted to set it up. So what I did was, off to the side, I created a new project. I set all of this core stuff up, this core engine, core scene dictionary, essentially. Basically, it's like the index in a book. You flip it open. You're looking for a specific chapter or something. You can look at it and then flip over to it. So we or I decided to make that project. This project served as a baseline for every project going forward. It has the simple scene transition, the main menu, the button templates, stuff like that. Audio engine is a big one, because one of the big things in a video game that you want to be able to do is go to the options page and adjust the settings for um, the audio, master file, music, etc. Um, so that's kind of what that project was meant to serve as. I never got around to finishing it fully, but it was good enough. It had what it needed in it. And really still was kind of struggling with, do I abandon Aetherforge and work on something else? Do I redesign Aetherforge in total? And then Pirate Software's Game Jam happened, and I found it as a perfect excuse to try something new with a limited timeline to work with. And I said, hey, I could try to build a game. If I have a game in mind for the theme, might as well go for it. And try this new architectural design and see if it makes more sense. What I didn't expect from that was all of the information that I learned. There was a huge, huge change in my approach and understanding of Godot's game engine. That came from, essentially the child instantiation that I was talking about, where you can extend a scene or script. So learned that, which was probably the best thing in my opinion. I got a little bit more comfortable with using signals and integrating those in with scenes, primarily like menus and everything. I struggled a little bit with that. I could develop mechanics, but doing UI stuff was a little bit more tricky for me. And I got really good, in my opinion, of handling that information. Learned a few other like useful skills along the way that I really wasn't expecting to actually learn, but just through this project alone, like I figured it out, and it was really cool. And we actually like completed a really cool project. You can still check it out, actually. Um, in fact, I'll actually pull it up real quick here, uh, just so you can see. And it's funny is it's actually the template to uh, this right now. So, let's see here. We'll take a look at that submission page. Here we go. So here we go. This is the submission page for the Game Jam game that we decided to make. We had 2 weeks to make. The theme was The World is Watching. We designed this. The art is coming from Nathan Lawson, who is the author of the Nullified comic series. He did some really cool work on this. It's not fully finished work, obviously. 2 weeks time span, so he kind of gave me some really rough drafts with some just coloring in there, which looked really good still. Some of it was rendered, like this bird I think he finished fully. So we had some cool work in there. Here's another picture. It was a turn-based game, which I had never built one before. I know they're typically a little bit more easier to manage. So, let's see here. Oh, I lost my mouse here. So, yeah, we decided to do that, and I learned a lot from this little game jam. Really helped understand a lot of different aspects of the Godot engine. But it also proved my theory. My theory was that my structure was incorrect, and the game architecture needed to be redesigned from the ground up for Aetherforge. I had debated on this for a while, but after doing this game jam in 2 weeks and just seeing the ease that I had with being able to add new scenes and add in, okay, well, I'll get into this, but the game that we actually submitted didn't have any sound effects. However, the stuff was set up for it. I had set up all of the audio engine stuff, ahead of time and really put in some work to make sure that that was something you could mess around with. But I didn't have time to actually add any sound effects in there, nor do I even think I have actually an options page in the submitted demo. But I mean, it's a prototype, so game jams are not meant to be fully, you know, polished games. They're meant to be a representation of what a game could be had you had more time and everything. Um, and it's also meant for you to learn, which that was the main part for me. Wasn't are we going to win? You know, I don't care about that. It was mainly can we learn something from this and create something cool, and I firmly believe that we did. Um, the game came out really well. The art was always, you know, fascinating as heck. That's probably the biggest comments I think we've had on this was fantastic art. Even though we were missing some assets, uh, I learned some UI issues, as you can see in this comment. So there were things that I learned from this, but it really helped solidify the whole point of the Aetherforge um, issues that were obviously being demonstrated that I was running into problems with. So, did the break from Aetherforge actually help? Uh, yeah, it did a ton. Like I said, I learned a lot through the Godot. As I was going through this project, I really was like, you know, if I was working on Aetherforge again, I would do it this way. I would do this way. Like I could have used this in Aetherforge. Like I could have really done this differently. Um, so many architectural design changes, even game mechanics. Honestly, it was just stuff that after this game jam, I was like, wow, you know, I could have really benefited from knowing this beforehand. But you know, that's how these things go. You kind of work and learn and progress and get better and come back. So, um, let's see here. Uh, the architectural shift. I mean, um, one of the biggest things, in my opinion, that I've struggled with um, from my career. I worked on I used to work on a SaaS platform, and if you don't know what a SaaS platform is, it's a software as a service. So typically, like these things will integrate between some other systems to other things, and they'll move data back and forth, and they kind of like work as a middleman between softwares or things that don't typically communicate to each other. So they're meant to be a nice little like connection point between different things. And ours was more of a platform. So in our platform, we had the ability to, you know, create data models, and we would create code structures and logic around that and screens based off of those. So my experience with data was obviously a little bit different than how game design works. And this might be a confusing topic, but typically um, in manufacturing, because that's really what I get into, or mostly any software related stuff, you'll have a database. And what you do is you save information to that database and you make requests to the database. So it's called querying if you've ever dealt with querying at all. That's essentially what it does. In fact, we can kind of show off a little bit here. Let's see if I can create one. Let's see, here we go. We'll use Obsidian here for this. So typically you have a database, um, and you'll have some system. Oh, come on now. Guess we can't copy and paste. And what you'll end up doing is you'll typically be querying that information and then receiving that information back. So we'll just put query here. Some of them call it insert, depending on the system you're working with, or mutations. So we would do query and mutations, inserting data into these data models, and then we would get them back to the systems and then give that to the user. Um, so you'd have your user screen, and this is kind of how this worked. But game engines don't really work that way. So instead, you really have to think about these as entities, in my opinion. And what that means is that your database, we put database here again. We're just going to call it DB. So your database, the structure, sits on top inside of this with the logic. So now it doesn't have to. You can separate these a little bit, but typically, I mean, you're talking about live data. Like it exists right there. There's no querying that information. It exists on the player. So when you create a player, you typically might have the player have stats. So they have a health and a mana, stamina, whatever it is. And you're not asking some system, hey, what is my health? You're, immediately accessing that variable saying, hey, your health is this. What is it? Or add that information to this. So it's a lot more, instantaneous. Querying does take a little bit of time to go back and forth. So those are kind of some of the things that I'm talking about here. So understanding that and putting that into Aetherforge and trying to figure that out. Aetherforge was really my first full game in Godot, because every time I change game engines, I'm always like, I don't know how this game engine works. So trying to just figure out things in Godot, Aetherforge was my first one. So obviously I made terrible, terrible design choices, and suffered for it. But, again, as we went through that game jam, I learned things, and I think I can take those back to apply for it. So what does this change for all future projects? As I mentioned earlier, this has the potential to allow us to develop faster. I mean, granted, it was a game jam, but we did have a game structure, the base game developed in a week. This was a playable MVP. We could prototype something faster. Aetherforge was meant to have a demo early on, and I just never was able to get it to the point I thought was good enough for a demo. And by good enough, I don't mean this felt like a full release. I meant more like, what mechanics was it showing off? Was it showing off what it needed to, show? And I couldn't ever justify that. I couldn't say, yeah, that's it. That's what it's doing. So we really decided to really just move away from that in general. Showing off. So sorry about that. So we've now taken this game I was showing here, The Accused, and we've kind of decided to continue working with it. But the story, the capacity it was actually being shown in the game jam is going to be changed. We catered the idea of this to the theme. We built the game around the theme, but we had such a good story built out, and character designs and art assets, that we really decided to shift focus to a different story base. The story that was built off of the theme didn't really work for us as much. So we've now moved towards, something that fits what we're trying to do a little bit better. So now this game here specifically is going to be a gladiator style game. I think it's going to be pretty cool. There's a lot of new assets that we're going to add, a lot of new stories, potentially adding more characters, a lot more to the game, obviously, than what was represented here in the game jam. So did the break from Aetherforge help? Absolutely. In fact, to the point I've actually got two projects going on. One of them is this, and another one is another project that I won't talk about just yet. And they're already pretty far along in their development. just from taking that break from Aetherforge and redesigning the architecture of how I approach the game design. Like I said, I just feel like a lot of tutorials, you know, don't focus much on creating the core aspects of the game, creating the scene transitions, the audio management pieces of it. So this new design and approach really helps bring us along a lot faster. Uh, I mean, we've killed like a few different projects over the years, but I feel like this is probably the best approach, best time that we've ever got to like designing video games. The fastest we've ever built video games is currently now. We've went through multiple game engines. We've went through, let's see, Unity, uh, Unreal, Game Maker, which was a total mistake. I was not a fan of that one. I'm not saying it's a bad engine. It just wasn't for us. And Godot is where we've landed, and I'm personally having a ton of fun with Godot. I think it has a lot of cool capabilities, and is one that I'm really keen on continuing to use. I think the other game engines that we might utilize in the future are absolutely going to be Unreal Engine as we get more team members, more people, more projects out the door. That'll be one we absolutely are going to use. We've had a few games developed for it. I killed one. Um, it's actually kind of funny because it's like, when do you decide to break from a game or kill a game? Um, and it's very easy to get into that motion, especially when you get to a certain point in your game project. Um, because regardless of how you build it, it becomes spaghetti code. I mean, you don't know what you're doing. Um, you look at something, you're like, I don't even remember what this does. So it's easy to get disheartened and want to abandon something, and maybe not abandon it, but you'll see people talk about it all the time in different chats. Um, they'll talk about, yeah, I scrapped the whole project and started redesigning it. And that's where I struggled with Aetherforge for the longest time. I was like, do I start over from scratch again? Or is this just going to be one of those, um, cycles that everybody gets into where it's like, okay, this doesn't make any sense anymore. Let me just start from the ground up. And you get, a certain point, and then you're like, okay, this doesn't make sense anymore. Let me start again. And you just waste so much time with it. And sometimes it's better to just continue than it is to redesign. And I fought with that feeling for so long with Aetherforge. Um, so this game jam specifically highlighted the fact that I was not wrong. Um, the approach that we had came on for Aetherforge was just not right, which is okay because, like I said, the Aetherforge was the first game that we ever developed on Godot, and I was learning the system, so it's okay. Like, yes, I did the tutorial games. I've also did a few other things, but it was my first project. Me, doing everything, trying to figure it out, putting in different code, that probably wasn't for the best, and I started from the middle. And I feel like, again, like tutorials, just they want you to focus on like the game mechanics, or that's the fun part everybody wants to get into is the game mechanics. So everybody starts at the game mechanics. Can I make the character walk? Can I make them pick up inventory? Can I make them hit something? Now I got an enemy, and like it starts to become a game, and you're all excited. Before you realize it, you've got all the way through this game, and you're like, okay, well now I need to open this door and go to another scene. But if I did this, and maybe I need to like split this, maybe there needs to be an option of like which door I need to go through. Well, you kind of screwed yourself in that aspect because how are you going to do that so easily? You don't have a screen dictionary or anything set up. So those are the kind of things that I think really screw with people, is just not setting that stuff up beforehand. So let me see if I can't get this pulled up real quick. We'll share a little bit of Aetherforge here. Get this launched real fast. We got about another 30 minutes. I'm only going to do an hour of these each Wednesday, so Sorry if you want to stick around longer. Make sure this opens up right. All right. Again, forgive any spaghetti code or anything that you see here. Uh, we will share some of this. I'm not going to go through the code aspect of this as much. I don't think anybody really cares for that. Let's just kind of show off what it is that's here. So we'll take a look at this. So this was the kind of starting area. This is your level 1. This is where you're supposed to start out. This is our demo area, I guess, more or less. Because as really the game started to progress and develop from an idea to, actually implementing it, this would have to change, obviously. But we had like little asteroids, and they did some really cool stuff. We had a little HUD for the character. One of the things I was actually really proud of was this patrol area I had set up. So this one enemy type would look for patrol areas, and they would pick between the 2 patrol areas, and they would go and do patrol between those until they seen a character or player, I mean, and then they would engage the player. And if the player got out of their sight, they would go back to their patrol area. We had a space station and this portal that's supposed to take you to another scene. So I think if I unplug this, hopefully I don't lose sound, but we shouldn't. Let me plug up this controller and we will showcase what it was that we had so far. Hopefully nothing's crashes, because I haven't messed with this one in a little bit, so let's make sure that this doesn't ruin. All right, so here we go. So we had the ability to fly around here. Again, this is like still early on development. We had the ability to activate a turret. The idea being that you could float and then move your turret, but not actually move. So that's why there's 2 systems. It's like driving a tank or manning the turret. You don't get to do both. You get to do one. And that was on purpose for specific reasons. But this is supposed to be more like a space sim, like roguelike kind of thing. So, we had abilities for ships. You can see that, you can do a little dash here, and it's kind of going through. There's going to be some more. These asteroids were kind of cool because we made it where they look like they're going in 3D as they're only 2D objects. So they'll kind of float around underneath you until they start growing. You see how it's kind of getting bigger? I thought that was actually really cool. At some point, it'll actually kind of switch over to a different layer. Looks like that one's going to go back down. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to get above where we need it to be. Come on. There we go. So now it's above us, which typically means that you can shoot at it, I believe. Unless it went back down. It went back down. So there were some issues with this, not from the mechanic standpoint. So, I mean, we had all of this stuff set up, but as we got these enemies, we need to be able to make new enemies, and they already have their own structure. The problem was the way I had set this up, there was no easy way to, just instantiate the scene, make a child of this, and then make a new enemy. That's really what should have happened, but the way this game was set up, there wasn't. So that was one of the big design changes we needed to make. The other one is this space station here. I think I have to hit E. So it's not that it's terrible, but the scene transition. So from transitioning from the space station to this scene right here, there wasn't a clean way to do it. And even just, clicking on something and then closing it, the interactions between like, okay, well, I have this new piece of equipment that I want to add onto my ship. I need to do something. I need to put it on my ship specifically. None of this stuff was set up easily, where you could actually do it. Even the close button doesn't work on all the screens because of the same issue that I'm talking about with the architectural design. So you can only close it out of one scene. Again, going back to the scene transition, when you hit this portal that's supposed to take you to another place, you run into issues like this. And this goes back to the managers, the architectural, the whole game, um, just issues that we had and really needed to be fixed. And it's just my fault, being new to game development with Godot. So breaking away from this, going to work on the game jam was a huge help. Um, and I really hope it shows when we are able to have the demo for the other game out. And honestly, I'd love to have a demo of this eventually. But the problem is we still haven't figured out the artistic design choices that we really want to go with on this. Where we want to take the ship designs, how we want them to look, and we really like to have our own art. This obviously is all free assets right now. So we'd love to take this out to some of the conventions and show it off. I don't think this one will be ready. I do think the redesign of our game jam will potentially be ready using this new architecture. So if you happen to see any of these videos or catch a live streams where I'm talking about this and the architectural, just know that this was just the labor of a bunch of different work, and hopefully you'll appreciate it as much as I do. I doubt it. People are usually just character doesn't play well. That's okay. But from the studio building aspect and the game design aspect, this was a huge turning point for us. Just figuring out does that work? Is this something that we can use and reuse and build upon? So making our own templates is just massive. If you can create a template or some way to work around something, reusable assets, whatever it is, absolutely, you should. At least in game design. I don't know about other things, but normally when you have the idea in your head, you know how to create it. So it's really helpful. Let's see. I don't know if we had much else going on today. We were just really talking about this. I guess I can kind of show off, since I have Godot open, what it is that I'm talking about as far as levels. So this might be a little hard to see, but we do have levels 1 in main. The problem is we don't really have an overall manager to manage these scenes or anything. And I'm not saying the new way we have it is perfect, but it's a lot better than what we're doing here. So I don't even know if I can find it. I really hope I do. Here we go. We got a portal here where it's looking to go get a specific reference to a level. And this is in the script for that entity itself. And that's how everything's set up in this. And it's just not a good design practice. So we really needed to fix all that and redo it and redesign it. So let's go back here. I'll launch the newer version of the Accused, because we don't even have the actual revised version, because I couldn't edit this since it was submitted to the game jam, which I don't think they've pulled the results for yet. No. So still waiting on all that. Here we go. Let's pull this over here. Take a look. All right, so what am I talking about when I'm talking about the overall architectural of the game? I'm referring to what I have here as the core engine. So we have the scene dictionary. So this houses all the scenes that exist in the game. Now, I could have done this better. I could have made this where it was, well, actually, no, it is. We can take a look at it. I don't think the scene manager exists typically. So I don't know if there's a way to actually alter the dictionary. That would probably have been nice to set up. But you can see that there is a dictionary of things. So I can just call this dictionary. It's a global script. I can say, hey, load up this scene, and it knows exactly where it's at. The only place I have to edit these if I ever change anything is here. I just, change this and say, hey, this now exists in this folder, and yada yada yada. I didn't have that before. Um, so we have the scene dictionary. Um, we have a get scenes function that goes and calls that up and returns it so that you can actually change the scene. And then we have our global manager, which is huge. I've killed a lot of this stuff for sound effects. But we have the FX library, which was newer. So it has the preloaded audio files for attack and defend. We set up a lot of stuff for the volumes. I was kind of messing around with some of that. Music. Let's see. I think most of it is FX, if I'm not mistaken. We do have the player's spawn position because I was gonna probably add some of that in. And that's really it. I mean, a lot of this is base stuff. I think we have an app GD. Nope, we didn't ever put anything in here. Let's see. I did have a button template that originally was created for. Haven't really added on to this much or used it. But these are the things I'm talking about. Having a scene manager, having a button template, having a global manager that you've set up. So, that is really some of the things that we, improved upon in our game development. So, that is really all I have for today. Um, I appreciate you and I encourage you to follow us as we continue to develop, all these different games, the comic book series, and the studio in general. I'm going to plan to do a live stream like this every Wednesday to kind of talk about the journey of the studio and my journey as a developer making video games or card games, whatever I'm personally invested in. We'll also have, I hope, potentially a stream every other week that's just a studio update that will hopefully contain me and at least Nathan and possibly Sam as a new member of the team, where we kind of talk about what we're doing, new announcements, projects that we're working on, and just general studio talk. So I encourage you to follow along, follow the journey of the studio, and hope to see you guys again. So I appreciate it. Thanks.